talk bad about my team, you must be a clown. This is Keek on the mic, so you know you better bear down. Bear down. Bear down.
Hey, what's going on, Bears fans? Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Keek on the Mic, the podcast all about the Chicago Bears. Like always, if you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the bell notification to catch all Bears content right here on the podcast. So, Bears fans, I have a really interesting topic for you guys today, and I felt the need to come on here and talk about this because when Ryan Poles officially got the job to become the new Chicago Bears GM, he came in and said, you know what, I want to revamp this whole roster with this type of player. But for the longest time, we were like, what type of players is Ryan Poles actually going to look for? And there's been a lot of players on the market that we thought could fit what he was looking for, but he just passed on them. So what type of players is Ryan Poles actually looking to add to this Chicago Bears roster? A report out of Chicago says Ryan Poles told Bears scouts to add one word to all other evaluations to not only college players, but veteran players as well. And I will get to that word shortly here on the podcast. And obviously, when the Chicago Bears scouts begin their evaluations on both the veteran and college players, they usually have a list of words already ready in their evaluations. These words include size, strength, quickness, toughness, intelligence, all that good stuff. And all these qualities, when looking for players to bolster your rosters, are very important. You want a player that is strong. You want a player that is tough. And you want a player that has a lot of intelligence. And Ryan Poles has been looking for players that have these qualities, and I know that. And as he revamps this Chicago Bears roster, he is going to continue to look for guys with these qualities. But according to Kevin Fishbain of The Athletic, Poles believes that one key trait isn't covered enough, a word he told his scouts to insert into every report they make moving forward, and that word is resilience. Kevin Fishbain had this to say. Bears college scouts have been told to add a trait to their list, in case it wasn't already there. Resilience. It's something Poles has mentioned with the veterans the Bears sign and what he looks for when scouting players. Someone alluded to the fact that a lot of the free agents we brought in were undrafted, Poles said. They had to fight, they had to be resilient. They had to prove. They had to have self-awareness to look themselves in the mirror and say, I've got to get better at these things if I'm going to make it. So we look forward to that. And you know what, Bears fans? It makes total sense that Poles is looking for players that have resilience. And it's always a good thing to look for players that work extremely hard to get to this point in their careers, guys that have chips on their shoulders. And it's always important to look for those type of guys. And, of course, you don't want to forget about the qualities that I mentioned earlier in the podcast, but it's always good to look for players with resilience. For example, it makes sense that Poles is looking for players with resilience because Ryan Poles is resilient himself. Look where Ryan Poles came from. He went undrafted out of Boston College in 2008, and then when you look at him as a scout, he had to work all the way from the bottom to get to where he is now. He worked hard. He put his head down. He was resilient, right? Maybe he faced adversity, which everyone faces adversity in everyday life, but it makes sense that Poles gravitates to players that have that chip on the shoulder, that, work hard, because that's where Ryan Poles came from. Another example that we can look at, just look at the players that Ryan Poles has added in free agency. For example, Byron Pringle went undrafted with the Kansas City Chiefs, had to work all the way from the bottom to get to where he is. I feel like he's an impact player, but he was kind of overshadowed in that Kansas City offense, right? Now he comes over to Chicago, and maybe he's going to be a featured highlight along the other side from Darnell Mooney. So that's another guy. Another guy you can look at is Al-Quadin Muhammad. 6th round pick that needed multiple seasons to really groom and to become that starter. So a resilient guy that had a chip on his shoulder, remained humble, worked hard, and then got that starting job. Another guy that we can look at is Nicholas Morrow. Nobody even really looked at Nicholas Morrow when he played D3 football in Greenville. So these are just a couple of guys that Ryan Poles has added in free agency that have that chip on their shoulder, that not were always the top guy on everyone's board, right, to bring into their team. But they had that chip on their shoulder. They remained resilient, remained humbled, and kept that hard work and kept that hard focus. And now look where they are in this point of their careers. These guys have faced adversity, right? They have worked extremely hard to get to where they are. And once again, they are resilient. So going into his first NFL draft as a Chicago Bears GM. Don't be surprised if he goes after guys that have that huge chip on their shoulder. And it's good to know now as a Bears fan what he is looking for, because I am not the only Bears fan out there that was wondering, well, what is Ryan Poles looking for? We all kind of had an idea like, oh yeah, he wants guys that are athletic, right? Guys that are fast, but that's not enough, right? This is a really good fact to know going into the NFL draft and going into the rest of the moves that he makes. He's looking for a certain piece and a certain quality in his players to bolster his team. And yes, I understand. Some guys may not have resilience. Sometimes you can't just fill a roster with a bunch of guys that are resilient, right? Some guys never faced any adversity. They just made it. But there always are going to be those guys, not only in the NFL draft, but also in free agency that may get left out of the picture, may not be everyone's first choice. So they have that chip on their shoulder. So they're going to come in and work their ass off to not only make the team, but make this Chicago Bears team better. And personally, I like football players that are like that, because that means you're guaranteed that they're going to come in and bust their ass for this football team. So Bears fans, like always, how do you guys feel about this report that Ryan Poles is looking for guys that are resilient? Let me know down below in the comment section. I can't wait to read your guys' responses. But before I let you guys go, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the bell notification to catch all Bears content right here on the podcast. Make sure you follow me on all my social media platforms, and make sure you share this episode of Geek on the Mic with every single Bears fan that you know. But other than that, I'll be back for an all-new Bears podcast right here on Geek on the Mic. Thanks, guys, and bear down.
You ain't bout it, you ain't bout it, you ain't kick on the mic. You ain't bout it, you ain't bout it, you ain't kick